It's a matter of how those actions happen in your life and what took place and how you responded to them that created this new person. So it's funny because this happens to us all day, every day, but we're doing it unintentionally. We're riding the wave and you don't realize that you can get a surfboard and control it much better. So when you do what you did, and you realize that, okay, I've outgrown this house, right? And you choose like, okay, I want to be this person. It's just choosing to get a surfboard instead of just floating in the wave with nothing.
Welcome to another episode of Negotiate Your Best Life. I am super excited today to have Anthony Trucks with me. I actually was on his podcast and that's how we met. And I was so fascinated by him and what he teaches and his methodology and his background that I just was like, I have to share him with you guys. So he's a former NFL athlete, American Ninja Warrior, and NBC international speaker, host of the Awe Shift podcast. Definitely check it out. Really interesting life. He was in foster care at 3 years old. He was adopted into an all-white family when he was 14. He lost his NFL career to injury. And he's really learned how to make shift happen. And that's what he teaches people how to do. And that's what we're going to be talking about today on this episode. So welcome, Anthony. So glad you're here.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So loving your story. Tell us more about that. Tell us about foster care, how you ended up there, what it was like, the whole
Yeah.
thing.
Of course. It's kind of we're here, right? Yeah, I guess the end of the day, there's going to be things that I know people are going to hear and be like, I can't resonate with that, but I will connect the dots so you can understand the feeling of it. So I was given away at 3 years old. My mom pretty much said, hey, me, and my other 3 kids, I don't want you guys. So put up into a system it's very, it's not really monitored as well as it should be. And the people that are in there, they're not the greatest humans. They've done some things that make it better, but it still has a little bit of funk to it. It just unfortunately does. So my first years of life were just really not feeling like I mattered, being starved and tortured and beaten by strangers
Oh
in
my
different houses and passed
God.
around. Yeah, it's difficult. I'm not gonna. There's no way to take that off. It's a difficult environment. However, you kind of learn to survive, man. It's like a sink or swim type situation. And I'm given a lot of situations and moments to develop a lot of intangible tools. And so like I have an ability now to navigate other people's like emotions more than most people can, or I'm able to read human beings better because it was a survival tool back then, right? So there's some assets that came out of it. And for me, like that upbringing, as much as I don't like it, I wouldn't say I like it, right? I do have a great appreciation for it. The things I learned about life and humanity that I wasn't even aware I was learning at the time have served me amazingly now as an adult in my chosen venture of life, we'll call it, because I get to reflect on a lot of things and my brain just turned on early. So I've spent more time, I think, in conscious, we'll call just viewing and kind of maybe more understanding on purpose, right? So some people they're awake and they're wow, but they're not really consistently trying to make sense of the world around them. Since my brain turned on, I've been trying to make sense of life for a long time. So I am told I have like a lot of I have an old soul. And I don't know if old soul is anything more than just like, you know what, I have some wisdom because I have been able to study the experience of my life. Some people experience things but never study it. They just let it happen. That's what took place. You ask them about it. I don't know. Whereas for me, I'm like, oh no, this took place. Here's what I learned about it. And I spent time and thought. And so I'm constantly trying to learn from this class we call life.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I mean, I always say like crap happens to everybody. You don't escape that as a human
Mhm.
being. And we all have debris that gets hurled at us. And if we don't find a way to have a lesson from it, then it's just crap that happened to us. And that's
Yeah,
just
unfortunately.
totally unacceptable. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and so I'm so reminded because I followed a lot of Wayne Dyer, before he died, of course. And then, even still, sometimes I go back to his teachings and he also spent time in foster care, a lot of his childhood. And he wrote a book, like I think it was his last book actually, and it was called I Can See Clearly Now. And he actually took each chapter of that book was a thing that happened to him that he can see clearly now was a pivotal moment in his life, or something that he really learned from, and something
Mhm.
that really changed the trajectory of his life. And at the time, it really, really sucked. But looking back, he's like, okay, I can see clearly now that that was something I needed to go through. And I was
Yeah.
able to, and if that didn't happen, and it seems like that's kind of what you're doing. You're taking every single one of those horrible things that happened to you and turned it into something that you could learn from, something that was good.
Perspective, yeah. It's always a perspective. I tell people perspective precedes enlightenment. So everything is a matter of how do you see the world? Because the world is giving us, like, if we think about exercising, lifting weights, if I lift weights that are heavy, I get strong. And if I'm strong, I can actually lift more weights and heavier weights. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't lift the weights of life. They leave the weight room of life. They leave the problem, avoid the situation. They never get stronger. And all I did is said, okay, let me stay under the weight. Let me figure out what happened. Why did this go wrong? So I get stronger. So that problem would occur similarly at a different capacity. It's much lighter to me, and I can handle it and go to the next problems that are actually the ones that I can actually overcome, that solve the things that, may hold me from the income, the marriage, the happiness, the joy. So all I did is said, let me take a new perspective on everything that happened, which is lifting that weight so I can be stronger for when I need that strength later.
So good, so good. So I'm curious to know, how did you end up being adopted? How did that all come about when you were 14?
Well, I ended up in a house that's my family now. I just, they pass you around when you're in that system. I don't know why, the rhyme or reason. You don't know where you're going or why. And next thing you know, you're just at a new place. And so one of the houses I ended up was the one. It's my family, all white family, only me, little black kid, very poor growing up. And so essentially, I had to navigate this whole weird pitfall of a world, and I did so. And in doing so, like, it landed me in this family that raised me and eventually adopted me at the age of 14. So I spent 11 years in the system, 8 years with this family, and it was a long 8 years, man. Because when you're in that family, you're in foster care, you still have a biological mom. Like, you have people that have called parental rights, which means although they don't live there, they have a say over what I can and can't do. So I wasn't allowed to play sports. I couldn't take trips. She was just spiteful, so wouldn't let me do much.
Oh
And
my
so, yeah, I
gosh.
was in a really weird, like, I was in a household with two sets of rules. The one that I lived with and the person that was outside the home who had the final say in an odd way. And so, yeah, it was interesting 8 years, but eventually was adopted, and was the first time at 14 that I knew this pillow that I woke up on, I for sure get to go to sleep on tonight.
So how old were you when you first ended up with the family that is now your family?
I was 6 at that time. After so
Six.
I got 3 years of different houses, 6 years old, landed at this house.
Oh, okay. So good. At least you were with this family since you were six, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, well, yeah.
That's
I was with
good.
him for
So,
6 years old. It was just a lot of the first foster dad in the house is a drunk. He used to beat my mom and beat me. It was a lot. I wouldn't say that we were like this pretty picket fence family by any means. Like, my
I
mom
see.
had my brother when she was 14. So we're like in this, it's like a weird dynamic of a
Oh my
household.
goodness.
His dad was gone. My mom had two more kids with her current husband. She divorced him, had two more kids. So I'm one of six. And there's like four
Wow.
last names in our family.
Oh my
There's
goodness.
Hart, Trucks, Costa, and Worthen. Like, it's a very interesting family. We got a little dynamic there.
Amazing. And what about your other three biological siblings? Are you still in touch with
I
them?
am still in touch. They're kind of nomadic. Well, somewhat. One sister lives in San Diego. One brother lives kind of in New Mexico-ish area. One sister lives in Minnesota. And we're in touch, but unfortunately, we're not as close as I'd like. I think
Mhm.
because we grew up separately, there's that bond that wasn't created the same way, right?
Sure.
There's
Yeah,
that
that makes
connection,
sense.
but not the bond is the best way to explain it. Love them to death, but it's different. It just is, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh, so interesting. And so you end up playing football. Did you start playing football in high school?
14 years old, the year right before high school, because I wasn't allowed to play. My real mom wouldn't let me play. So my biological mom was like, hey, no sports, no football. And then when I got adopted, I could finally play football.
Okay, so you start playing football, you play through high school, and then you go to college, playing football, I'm assuming?
Yep, go to college on a football scholarship, which beat a lot of odds because if I didn't go, I'm the only kid in all six of us to actually graduate with a diploma from the high school, not continuation school, not GED. So, yeah, most definitely I'm the oddball there. Only want to go to college, and like all my family, between my mom and her siblings, like so my aunts and uncles, all the kids, I'm the only one with a college degree. So like I'm the
Where did
weird
you go?
oddity. I went to the University of Oregon. I'm a Duck.
Doc, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And good football team, great football team. And
Yeah, we
so
played. It was a great
from
football
there,
team.
you get drafted to what team on the NFL?
Didn't get drafted. I was what's called a priority free agent. So I was told I'd be drafted in like the 5th round, 6th round, just never got the call. And then the moment the draft closed, within 15 minutes, I was signed with the Buccaneers. So I ended up playing with the Buccaneers
You
fresh
were in
out as a rookie.
Tampa in Florida.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, okay. I spent a lot of time in Florida. I lived there for about 20 years, so I'm
Yeah,
very
Florida's
familiar.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. And then you get injured.
Yeah, my 3rd
Did you?
year. So I played with the Buccaneers, then got cut, got picked up by the Redskins, got cut, then got picked up by the Steelers, tore my shoulder. And then that was the end of that season and eventually essentially the end of my career.
Oh, wow. Okay. I grew up in DC. So I'm still a Redskins fan, but we don't call
Yeah.
them that anymore.
They're watching Reds. Yeah, Washington football team. It's weird. So technically, I was a Redskin. I've never been a Washington football player. I've
I
been a
know.
Redskin.
I still have to say Redskins. I mean, just because that's,
That's what
what I
you know
grew
it
up
as.
with them
Skin.
as knowing. But okay, so you get hurt. It's like, how do you feel at that point? Like it's the end of your world?
You know what's funny you get hurt. It's part of the game. I'd already torn my other shoulder in college. I'd broken wrist, so injury is part of the game. In your head, it's not the end. It's just like I gotta recover and rehab. Da, 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 da. But then when you find out it's the end, that is a blow. Because at one point I realized like I'd done some workouts with like different teams, and the Buffalo Bills. I did a workout. They're like, "Hey, we want to sign you." My agent calls me and says, "Hey, the Buffalo Bills want to sign you, but they want to put a waiver on your shoulder." Like, what do you mean a waiver? He says, well, what it means is if something happens to your shoulder, the NFL or the team, neither are liable. You are. So if you take this contract and hurt your shoulder, you're screwed. No one's going to take care of paying for the recovery. No one's going to pay for surgery or anything. He says the tough part about this is essentially if you have some kind of like disability, like, that happens because of this, you really get hurt, you're kind of screwed because most insurance are not going to take work injuries, like, pre-existing injuries. They don't take them. So he's like, you got to make a really tough choice. He's like, because if you do this, you could be disabled for life and your kid's going to have the same kind of dad. Or you just realize that every contract from here on is going to be like this and you choose to hang it up. And I,
Mm.
and I, and I said, what would you do? And he says, to be honest, I would not jeopardize the family. He says, I'd hang it up. So made the choice to hang the jersey up, dude. And it was a tough one. That is a very hard choice to give up something that you've been doing for, you're pretty much, it was there when I grew up as a 14-year-old boy to a man with 3 children now. That's tough to hang up, like marriage, everything happened. So it ripped out what I believed was me. That's the best way to explain it. It's like when a
Oh,
guy leaves the military, a girl leaves the military, you lose your job, you retire, you lose a relationship. When you've given something so much of you and then it's ripped away from you without you wanting to let it go, or even if you choose to walk away from it, it leaves this massive hole. And that's what I had, was a massive hole.
wow. What a powerful statement. It ripped out what I believed was me. I'm sure so many people can relate to that statement, maybe not as an NFL player, but in many different ways in their lives, right? Because
Yeah.
you didn't really have a plan B, probably.
No, you have a thought of what you might do, but you don't know. I mean, there's people that are adults now, 40 years old, that don't know what they're doing. So, a 25-year-old kid who's never been in an actual work world. I've never been in the real world before. I had no plan. I had nobody that I even had in my circle that was going to give me advice or guidance. I was the only one to go to college and play at this level. Like, is a very lonely island, and then you talk to teammates and there's other guys kind of doing it, but they're dealing with different stuff too. So it's a very like stark reality when it all hits you of what your life is about to look like, and it gets dark quick.
Wow. So what happened? What did you do?
I
How
tried to
did you
find a
shift?
way.
That's the question, I guess.
How
How
did
did
I
you
shift?
shift?
I didn't shift then. This was 2008. It took another 8 years. And I think about it, I've never said it like that. I realize there's a lot of stuff that happened in between. But man, like my marriage fell apart. I wasn't a great parent. The business was always up and down. I was looking at bankruptcy like 9 months in and somehow got through it. But I was always on the bubble for like 6 years, on the bubble of this business of almost losing it, keeping it around. Somehow it works out, like payroll, rent, everything. And in that process, man, lost the marriage, lost all that. I was living in a 500 square foot studio apartment behind the house of one of my front desk or one of my trainer's girlfriends. very weird, power dynamic. At work, I'm the boss, but at the house, like him and her are the boss. And I was like, my kid slept on an air mattress next to my bed. It was a very different experience of life than I ever thought I'd be in. I didn't really like myself too much, man, to be honest. I wasn't a fan of Anthony, oddly. And went through that whole journey of up and down. And then unfortunately in 2014, April 15th, I lost my mom. When I was 14 years old, she'd been diagnosed with MS,
Is
and she had
this
a
your
17-year
adoptive
battle.
mom or the
My
one?
adoptive mom. Yeah,
Okay.
my adoptive mom. And when she passed away, like, I had this really interesting conversation with self and one with her before she passed, of the reality of what I've been able to accomplish past what statistically I should have been, and how much of her as a human showing up responsible for that taking place. And I made two promises. One promise was, I'm going to figure my life out again. I got to figure this thing. I can't keep doing this. And then two, when I do, I'm going to help people do the same. I didn't know how I was going to do it, to be honest. I didn't know the speaking world existed. I knew none of this. I, at the time, was a gym owner. I was like, I'm a gym owner. I'm going to get people in shape and help them make their lives better. And what ended up happening was, God put some interesting things in my life. I got this massive contract for $250,000, which was 220,000 in profit from a large company I was consulting for. My gym lease was up, so I didn't have to renew the lease. I happened across this world like 2 months later in June of speaking and coaching. So I'm like, man, maybe I go out in the world and I tell my story and I find a way to get my life on track while teaching. Now, that's not the best recipe for success. You don't teach what you're still learning. You know what I mean? Like, it's not the best, the most ideal. So it took me 2 more years before I finally woke up and, like, not loved. I realized I was still not in love with myself, burning through my money, just doing my thing. And I had this moment of like, I don't like me. And this is where the
Mm.
shift took place. I remember looking in the mirror one day on New Year's Eve day and like, I don't like this guy. I would never want my daughter to be with a guy like me. I'd never want my sons to be like me. I would not want, my God to see me because he wouldn't let me into heaven. My mom would be pissed looking at this guy. I was like, something's got to change. And I realized that I was the common denominator in all my problems. Me. I was the one
Mhm.
experiencing them all. So if I'm the
Mhm.
common denominator, what if I look at me and I shift something? Now, shift wasn't the idea. It was like change. If I change something, and I don't think a person has to change consistently and completely, because who I am at my core, I'm kind of the same guy I was in high school, to be quite honest. But there's certain parts of how I operate and how I show up and what I have integrity in and what I fight for that are vastly different as a human. And that's more of the shift. You make that 1 degree shift that changes everything around you. And so that was where it took place. And I started doing things where I cut off women because I didn't want to spend time just, like running around doing dumb stuff, with multiple partners. I cut off certain friends that weren't serving me. I started taking up new hobbies of reading and going and hiking. I started doing things. Now, at the time, it was very unintentional. I didn't know really what I was building, and I think people do that sometimes, just start doing things without really realizing what we're doing. Since then, I've made a lot of different adjustments to my shifts because I'm like, I don't know if that's the path to go on. So I've made some adjustments. But fast forward 10 months from that moment in New Year's Day in 2016, I got back with my ex-wife after 3 years divorce. We have an amazing marriage now. Kids have a present father. I've been able to figure out, like, not only my craziness, but how to solve that problem for myself and people. And so now when I work with individuals, I'm helping them make those shifts in their life. And it could be everything from, I want to shift to make more money in my business. Great. We go and look at the strategy of the business and the strategy of them. Or I'm like, hey, I want to be a better man so I can actually maybe get a great relationship. Phenomenal. Let's take a look at what that identity looks like to do that. Let's see how we shift to that. So I go and I use what's called the shift method to plot this course and set action towards it. It's pretty simple. It's a lot of depth, but that's the simple way to look at it. And in doing so, man, I've been able to make good on promise one. Like, I was able to get to the point of, like, just being great in my own life. I'm happy, healthy. So I made promise one to my mom. Good. Now I'm doing promise two. And I've been doing it for, shoot, man, since 2016. Now we're going on 5 years, like really, really digging into doing it. But
So
what's
I
beautiful
just
about it.
want to point something out
Yeah, yeah,
because
go
you're
ahead.
saying it without you haven't said it exactly in this way, but I've always said that there is a redemptive power in just making a choice.
Oh, hell yeah. I
Like,
fully agree. Made this decision to it.
literally, you just made a decision. You literally just decided
Mhm.
that this isn't going to be me anymore. I'm going to do it differently.
Yeah.
This is not my story. Like in that moment that you made that decision, that's when you were able to, I mean, I honestly believe the universe just starts to go, okay, this is the direction we're going, and everything starts to line up for you in that way. But you have to start by making that decision.
Yeah, and it is hard though. I mean, because you're pretty much saying, "I'm gonna go out and do things against what my words have said to certain people." How I may not be accepted by certain people, and in doing so, you have to realize you're gonna have to kill off that old person. Like the cost of a new life is your old one. It just is what it is, and it's
Yeah,
hard.
I always found it really interesting that the word decide actually has side as part of it, which
Kill.
in Latin means to kill.
Yeah,
So you actually are killing off
the other side. Yeah, it's hundred
everything else.
percent. And people, that's a fearful, scary thing to do. And it's funny at the time, I didn't think I was doing that. I was just tired of what I was doing. I was fed up. People are like, well, what was the thing? I was just fed up with living what I was living. I didn't feel good inside. And if you can give yourself permission, which is what you pretty much are saying, decide. One part of it's a choice to do that. The other one's giving yourself, before that even happens, giving yourself permission to improve. Because most people, they'll see it and they'll tuck it away. I don't want anybody to see that. They don't give themselves permission to feel it, to own it, to accept it. Therefore, they never make that choice. They don't decide, and that part of their life stays there.
Yeah, but you also have to, in some place in in your psyche, have to feel like you're worthy of that. Have to feel like, because I think sometimes people, they get stuck in these places because they
Mhm.
don't feel like they're good enough on some subconscious level
100%.
to have a good relationship, to have a good life, to have
Yeah.
money, to
Yeah.
have be a good spouse.
Yeah. Especially if you've done crazy things. If you've done some things that are difficult, it's even harder. But I unfortunately don't think that worthiness exists inside of a lot of people who start the process. I think that there's some inherent belief that if I just do things, it'll just work out. I just know this is right. I don't know why I'm just going to do it, and we'll step into those things. The crazy thing is doing the action and seeing the outcome creates that sense of confidence and worthiness. And I think we need, if we don't know it's there, we need to realize it can be there by simply doing the thing. That's all it is. It's not a matter of starting out saying, I am worthy of a great relationship, therefore I'm gonna go fight for it. Because the fight's gonna die if you don't believe you're worthy, right? So it's like a weird oxymoron. But here's what I do believe. If you take that small step, when you don't feel worthy, when you don't feel confident, that creates an outcome that gives you worthiness, or an outcome that feels confidence, because it's an investment bias. If I invest in something, I want to return, right? Money, I give investment, I want to return. As humans, the investment towards a direction, the return is confidence, self-esteem, joy, worthiness. And if you
Mm.
sit back and wait for that bank to fill up without putting money into it, you're sadly mistaken. You got to go and make that investment. And a lot of it's going to be an unconfident, unworthy action that returns a sense of worthiness and confidence.
Oh, that is so true and so good. And I mean, honestly, I mean, I remember when I started my law practice and I went out on my own, and I had taken over, a friend of mine had a few, like a handful of clients, and she was moving. And so I took over her clients. And I remember saying to my best friend, I I'm so afraid that I'm going to finish off her clients and then never get one of my own. And
Mhm.
like, I signed this lease, and I got a paralegal and all this stuff, and like, what's going to happen? And she goes, "Oh, that's not going to happen. Your problem's going to be that you have too many clients." And I was like, "I don't know. I hope so."
Mhm.
And so I just did it. And and I remember meeting with my first client of my own, going, "Okay, look, I got one," and then thousands of clients later,
Snowball,
I
yeah.
do feel so much better. I mean, and I don't even have to practice anymore
Even question it. It's just who you are.
because
Yeah,
I'm
you
doing
know.
other things, bigger things,
Yeah,
better thing, more. I'm helping more people around the globe, and so, but it does. It's exactly like what you said. I had to just take that step, and there's a saying like "leap and the net will appear," and I
yeah.
definitely think that's so true.
And you know what it is? You just described what I shifted. If I was to ask you how much of that person still exists in you, you'd be like, not much.
Oh, the
If it's
person before of like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I'm afraid I'll never have a client," or whatever, doesn't even
No.
exist.
Doesn't right?
In
Complete new
fact, I'm
identity.
100% certain that if I stopped doing all my YouTube stuff and stopped training people around the globe on negotiations and stopped doing all the things that I'm doing now and
Yeah.
just said, all I'm going to do is practice law, I would sit down in my chair and within a week, I would have too many clients.
Yeah.
Is something I am certain
Di
of.
different now that's like a complete different identity, right? And what's
Completely.
crazy is you just described it. You started, you did the actions. Over time, you start becoming that human. I tell people what you create creates you. Your process of creating this life, no matter what the actions were, created this person you are, and you can't go backwards now. Like it's just who you are now. That's the secret. That's it. There's not magic. That is really it. There's a lot that goes into making that happen, but that's the beauty of the whole thing. To make
It's
a
so
shift just comes from
true.
actions.
It's so true. You could never go back. I mean, I think of it as like, remember how in the story Alice in Wonderland, when she ate the one pill, she was like way too big for the house and her arms and legs
Mhm.
were coming out of the house, you know,
Yes.
like that house doesn't fit you anymore. You
Yeah,
know, you're expanding, you're growing, and you know, you don't even feel it until you look back and you go, wow, look at what
different.
I've done. Look at what I've been able to accomplish. Right.
And what's crazy is I just finished my book and I have a quote by Lewis Carroll in there, which is from the Alice in Wonderland. And it says when she came back from Wonderland, somebody says, "What happened?" And she goes, there's no need even going back there because I'm not the same person anymore." Like it literally is like she's like, there's no need to go back and think about that person because that's not who I am now. 3 days, 2 or 3 days, right? And what I realized in that moment reading it, I'm like, because it's a matter of how those actions happen in your life and what took place and how you responded to them that created this new person. So it's funny because this happens to us all day, every day, but we're doing it unintentionally. We're riding the wave, and you don't realize that you can get a surfboard and control it much better. So when you do what you did, and you realize that okay, I've outgrown this house, right? And you choose like, okay, I want to be this person. It's just choosing to get a surfboard instead of just floating in the wave with nothing.
Yeah, I love that. That's so beautiful. I didn't even know that you had the Alice in Wonderland quote in your book. How about that? Like
Hey,
just
it all worked out.
synchronicity going on over here.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
love that. So when does your book come out?
September. I don't have a specific date, but it comes out in September of this year.
We'll have you back on to help you
I'm
promote your
on.
book.
Count me on. Yeah, I'd love
Yeah.
to.
We'll definitely help you promote it. So tell us about the shift method. We haven't even gotten there yet, and we need to hear about
Uh,
it.
yeah, yeah. Well, we don't have a bunch of time. We got both got to jump in a moment. But the shift method was created out of a couple things. One was my life experience. What did I go through? And I went back and researched all of it and looked back through it. Then I said, okay, let me take a look at psychology. How does psychology match and merge to make this thing actually be real? And then I looked at neuroscience and how do we actually look at neuroplasticity and what do I do to reprogram and honestly rewire the brain? And I developed a really cool process that anybody can walk through from any walk of life. They can read and walk and talk or write, or if you have a brain you can communicate, it'll work for you. And it walks you through the process of seeing yourself, who you are right now, creating what's called an ideal identity, and then charting the path to actually get there, and then walking the path to make the shift. It's tried and true. It's like bulletproof at this point because I've done it so many times. But it's awesome, man. People come out of it with a whole new like sense of self and brand new accomplishments. So they make money, they get healthier, they are happier. And it's not just they have these things, but they are the person who has those things.
So is this something that you do one-on-one with people, or is there a course? Tell us
Yeah,
how
we have
they
four
can get
different
to
levels. So one is a membership, which is actually use some of our tools. We have something called the Shift in Three tool. It's a rhythm reset technology. It's a way that I look at identity as like a rhythm for our life. So the tool we have a called Shift Starter, which is a program that has individuals who are desiring to start this whole process, figure out my limiting beliefs, what's been keeping me stuck, find out how to be able to get a really clear vision, and honestly get rid of the limiting beliefs and then move forwards. And then we have a called the incubator, which is mostly for individuals who are like entrepreneurial. So it's an incubator program that's we're going to give you the structure of a business that you may need. The missing pieces that most people don't have is a method, a process, a foundation, any kind of business system. So we teach that to you while implementing the shift method so you become a new person while building that business. Because you can't grow your business more than you grow yourself. Then I have a mastermind. And then I don't do one-on-one often, but we do have one-on-one options.
Oh, I love that. So how can people find out about you, get started, follow you? Where
Easy.
can they
Just
find you?
if you go to my Instagram at Anthony Trucks and DM me the word shift. It's simple. I don't make it complicated. Then I start a conversation with you. I kind of see where the best fit is, and we kind of hopefully see if it works and push in that direction.
Love it. Go check him out on Instagram and DM him the word shift and get started. Go follow him, check out his stuff, listen to his podcast. Definitely
Yeah.
subscribe, rate it, write a review for him, and go check him out so you can start shifting in your life. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Anthony, for being here.